Air travel provides us with wonderful opportunities. 73% of all air travel today is for pleasure, attending weddings, visiting family and friends, and going on vacations, leaving the remaining air travel for business trips, attending college, and perhaps medical treatments. And if you're like my family, you flew in just for this event today. Thanks, Dad. But did you know many people miss out on these same wonderful opportunities because airplanes are not wheelchair accessible? You only have to read the headlines from this past year to know change is needed. The headlines may be different, but the stories are the same. People are injured, or their dignity, or their mobility has been taken away. Many great organizations have already taken on the platform of accessible air travel, but there's still a gap. No organization has taken on the funding or the conducting of research needed for true accessible air travel. Everyone has a different definition or different expectation on what true accessible air travel is. But I'm going to let you know what I think it is. It is a wheelchair spot on airplanes, just like you find on buses, trains, and even Disney rides today. So in 2011, I created All Wheels Up. All Wheels Up is a nonprofit research organization, and we are the only organization in the world to be crash testing wheelchairs and wheelchair tie-down systems for commercial flight. All Wheels Up is funding and conducting the research needed for a wheelchair spot on airplanes. Today, there are over 4 million Americans who use wheelchairs as their primary means of mobility. In a survey conducted by All Wheels Up, 80% of wheelchair users do not fly because airplanes are not wheelchair accessible, as well as the risk of injury to themselves and the risk of damage done to their wheelchairs. The DOT just published a report this past month that the US air carriers are damaging and breaking 25 wheelchairs a day. We can do better. 9 years ago, I was the least likely person you would expect to be an advocate for a wheelchair spot on airplanes. I am not an engineer, and nor do I work in the aviation industry. I have a business degree from the Fashion Institute of Technology. I have worked for Ralph Lauren, Calvin Klein, and today I work for JCPenney's right here in Plano, Texas. Truthfully, I may have spent more time on what I was going to wear for all of you today than I should admit. But seriously, what I did learn from working for these successful organizations is you do not lead with the problem, you lead with the solution. I do not have a disability, but my son Grayson does. Grayson has spinal muscular atrophy, or SMA. SMA is a neuromuscular illness, and it robs children of their ability to move, and Grayson uses a wheelchair. I could have never have imagined that one day as a family, traveling by airplane would one day become nearly impossible, limiting our vacation options and missing out on wonderful opportunities. 2 years ago, my family missed out on the beautiful opportunity of attending my twin sister's wedding because my husband Douglas and my son Grayson needed to stay behind because air travel is too risky. Grayson's dream destination is Japan. He loves sushi and anime art. And so my goal is to get Grayson to his dream destination. I know firsthand how difficult it is to travel with someone who uses a wheelchair. I have the responsibility of making sure he gets into his airplane seat safely. And then also as the caregiver, I am responsible to go back to the jetway and disassemble his wheelchair in the safest possible manner to be stowed as luggage. I think it's a relatively unknown fact, but wheelchairs can cost anywhere between $10,000 and $78,000. That's right, $78,000. And now I'm expected to stow it as luggage. Let's be clear, my son drives a wheelchair that costs more than my car. So these experiences of trying to get my son onto an airplane left me physically and emotionally exhausted. But I knew change was possible. My family owns a wheelchair-accessible minivan, and in this minivan are wheelchair securement systems. Now, wheelchair securement systems, or wheelchair tie-down systems, allows the wheelchair user to remain in their wheelchair and to be transported to their destination safely. My solution? Why couldn't we have similar tie-down systems built specifically for aviation purposes and have a wheelchair spot on airplanes? So I started doing research and learned that the wheelchair tie-down systems in my minivan passed a 20G crash test. Knowing nothing about aviation, I looked up the crash test standards for the airplane seats that you and I sit in today, and that is 16 Gs. Does anyone see where this is going? So I thought I'd call the FAA. I thought in one phone call, I was going to change the world. All they needed was the information. It took a couple of more phone calls. But we did have several conversations. Unfortunately, this was not a project that the FAA could take on, but they did give me a lot of great advice. And so that is when I became not just a crazy mom with an idea, but set out to write history. Now, you would think trying to get someone onto an airplane is a new or novel idea. This is President FDR's airplane, or the first Air Force One. In 1942, it was modified for FDR's political safety as well as his dignity. Winston Churchill commented on this elevator, saying, "We wouldn't expect the most powerful man in the world to be carried like a baby." My position on this is the engineers of today aren't any less intelligent and aren't any less empathetic, and if given the opportunity, they could build an aircraft that is has a wheelchair spot that is both safe and economical. We also learned of Gordon Rattray. Gordon works for the UN, and he has the unique opportunity to fly on UN missions in the safety of his own wheelchair. In this photo, he's on a C-130 strapped down with military cargo ties. In our interviews with Gordon, he has expressed no issues with takeoff, landing, or turbulence. And he's also told us that this is the most comfortable way he's been able to travel since his accident. All Wheels Up is now using this as a model to work with disaster organizations as we consider new strategies on how we evacuate people during disaster situations. Now, I knew that if I was going to take this idea to the airlines, our messaging needed to be different. So one, our organization does not blame or shame any one organization for where we are today. Two, a project of this magnitude needs to be a collaborative project with all of our stakeholders. And so we are now hosting working group sessions with everyone from plane manufacturers to wheelchair manufacturers. And three, if I was going to take this crazy idea to the airlines, I better speak their language, and that is safety and economics. And so not only are we crash testing wheelchairs and wheelchair tie-down systems, but we are also providing support data, such as budget impact models, because anything is possible, but at what cost? In 2015, All Wheels Up launched its very first animation on what we thought could be a wheelchair spot on airplanes. After our collaborative working group sessions with major stakeholders, we are proud to launch a new animation on what we think a wheelchair spot could look like in the future. These animations have been a great aha moment for the wheelchair community, as well as great discussion starters with our stakeholders. In 2016, All Wheels Up conducted the very first crash test of wheelchair tie-down systems at an FAA-approved testing facility. These crash tests played a pinnacle part in the feasibility study being added to the FAA Reauthorization Act and being signed by the President in 2018. In 2019, All Wheels Up conducted the very first crash test of wheelchairs as airplane seats with success. All Wheels Up has proven a wheelchair spot is possible, but more work needs to be done. So we move forward with more R&D, more testing, but most importantly, the proper certifications of wheelchairs and wheelchair tie-down systems, because your safety is more important than any time frame I can put on this project. A wheelchair spot will revolutionize the airline industry, but it will also impact the tourism industry, as well as pharmaceutical companies looking to get more patients to clinical trials. And these are just two examples of how a wheelchair spot could impact industry. But how does this impact you? Peoples with disabilities is the largest minority group any one person can join at any time. And so as thousands of people are aged, injured, or diagnosed into disability every year, the chances of your life being impacted by accessible air travel is 1 in 5. And so my personal goal is to get Grayson to his dream destination. But the goal of All Wheels Up is to get every wheelchair user to their dream destination safely and with dignity.